By now, y'all know how I feel about Harry S Truman. If not, I think this little old white man was a badass. Yeah, when it comes to presidents and civil rights, I think he was a badass. Now, keep in mind, he was the grandchild of a slaveholder. He was a Democrat. And remember, at the time, the Democrats was the party of the South. They were the party of segregation. They were the party of lynchings. Okay. Truman used racial slurs, opposed interracial marriages. Um, he didn't question segregation. Uh, he was a good old boy. Yeah. But what happens when you leave your small town in Missouri and join the military and get exposed to other people? What happens when you see the violence that Black people are subject to? Well, for Truman, you do a 180. You see something wrong happening. You say, "Oh, that's not right." You see inequality and you say, "Oh, that's not right." You do a 180 and you start fighting for the rights of people that you previously were insulting. That was Harry S. Truman. In 1940, while Truman was seeking re-election to the Senate, he says, "I believe in the brotherhood of man, not merely the brotherhood of white men, but the brotherhood of all men before law. I believe in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, in giving the Negro the rights which are theirs. We are only acting in accord with our own ideals of a true democracy." But that could be just talk. It means nothing if there's no action, right? You know how I am. There needs to be action. Well, how about this? He's the only president to come to the White House with a civil rights platform, the first to do so. This is a man who supported anti-lynching movement and advocated for federal legislation to protect against lynching. He was the first president to speak to the NAACP. His beliefs on civil rights broke the Democratic Party. 35 delegates walked out of the Democratic National Convention and created their own party, the States' Rights Party. And when a Black World War II veteran was beaten and blinded by a South Carolina sheriff and then found not guilty by a white jury, and when two Black couples were lynched in Georgia and nobody knew anything about it, Truman, disgusted, started issuing a series of civil rights executive orders. One of them being Executive Order 9980. Signed in July 1946, Executive Order 9980 prohibited discrimination in the federal government based on race, color, religion, or national origin. It also required that federal appointing officers base their action on merit and fitness. Now, when Truman took office, Washington, D.C. was a segregated city. There were whites only sign or Negroes only signs designating and separating lunchrooms, workplaces, and restrooms. In the government civil service, many work units and job functions were separated based on race. Denial of employment and promotion and separate dining and restroom facilities often characterized the experience and limited upward mobility for Black workers. Segregation edicts permitted by President Woodrow Wilson, who had served from 1913 until 1921, remained in place. And of course, we've got the military. Upwards of 1.2 million African Americans served in the U.S. military domestically, in Europe, and the Pacific. As with civilian life, segregation policies had been adopted within the military. After World War II, when Truman learned that African American veterans returning home from fighting for freedom abroad were being met with racism and even violence at home, he resolved that the federal government must address civil rights. The United States, he says, must fulfill the promise of democracy. This is what and you know what? He's not wrong. He's not wrong. I'm biased though. Okay. In 1946, the president issues Executive Order 9808, creating the President's Committee on Civil Rights. And they were to look into ways to strengthen the civil rights of the people. We talked about this. They issued a report in 1947 that urged the enactment of federal and state laws prohibiting all forms of discrimination in private and public employment based on color, creed, or national origin. You can tell that that didn't happen, right? You can tell. Okay, I was just checking. In a special message to Congress, the president asked for a law to create a permanent fair employment practice committee. This was one of the suggestions from the committee. This demand was reaffirmed in the Democratic Party platform of 1948 and was urged upon by Congress again by the president in his State of the Union message. Opposition to a federal law prohibiting discrimination in employment has been based on a variety of arguments. Criticism of such legislation has been based on the claim that entrenched viewpoints and customs cannot be eliminated by law and that effective administration and enforcement would be impossible. Opponents have expressed the opinion that business enterprise would be adversely affected if an employer were forced to hire employees with whom he prefers not to deal. They claim that public morale and minority groups would suffer rather than benefit from any attempt to substitute legislation for education. When Truman spoke to the NAACP, he said recent events in the United States and abroad have made us realize that it is more important today than ever before to ensure that all Americans enjoy these rights. When I say Americans, I mean all Americans. Our national government must show the way. Frustrated by congressional inaction and armed with documentation from his Committee on Civil Rights that found discriminatory practices pervaded federal agencies, President Truman issued the executive order. To give Executive Order 9980 strength and ensure implementation, Truman made the presidentially appointed heads of each department or agency responsible. Within a year, 18 agencies had desegregated, and some agency heads that had not cooperated were removed from their positions. He's like, get on board or get out. This is the preamble to 9980. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the President that there shall be equality of treatment and opportunity for all persons in the armed services without regard to race, color, religion, or national origin. This policy shall be put into effect as rapidly as possible, having due regard to the time required to effectuate any necessary changes without impairing efficiency or morale. Truman's decision to issue these orders, 9808, 9980, and 9981, and his actions that led up to that decision, set the course for civil rights for the rest of the century. 16 years after Truman issued Executive Orders 9980 and 9981, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act into law. Later, Bill Moyers, one of Johnson's top aides, commented, "Truman's hand steadied his."